Hello. It is a dark episode for January the 16th, 2022. I think I want to give over this dark episode to me thinking about a question. Um, I decided today, since I actually don't have any outstanding reviews to make, that I would do a tag. And I decided I'd do the Astounding Book Tag by Michael K. Vaughan, which is all about science fiction, if you're a lover of science fiction. And it kind of resonated with me. And as I kind of went through, I kind of went into my office to kind of quickly prep, and it took a lot longer than I expected. And I think it comes down to the fact that science fiction and fantasy, to be honest, were really formative parts of me growing up as a teen. Um, it's one of those things of, um, I read a lot. All the way through all this, I read, but I I had a good period in there where I read a lot of comics. And then just economically, I was like, well, I'm going to get more bang for the buck if I go into reading books, into science fiction. And so I read science fiction for a good hunk of my development. And then after that, things kind of bifurcated out from there, and it was no longer just centrally. As a kid, you kind of really focus on one thing, and for me, really kind of developmentally, as a person, as a dude, I think science fiction, especially science fiction, kind of it feels like it represents a period of my life. Which isn't to say I haven't I don't still read science fiction. I will list in the tag a lot of the science fiction I read, but it seems like science fiction appealed to me because it was one of these things where it was like people talking about the future and taking ownership of the future. And I think as a young guy who was like, oh, the possibilities of life, and like, what am I going to do in this world? And who am I going to be as a man growing up in this world? It psychologically resonated in a way that you could kind of pour yourself into what was a lot of the kind of the golden age science fiction. Psst, psst, Theo, psst, psst, come on, go on. Sorry, that's Theo. It's like, pour myself into a lot of these guys, these men of science fiction. I grew up in the 80s, and you know it's a sexist time now. It was super sexist then, and a lot of the people that I read were actually writers who had written their works, because I was hanging out in secondhand bookstores, and it's like the big venerated people of science fiction were the guys who were probably past their prime at the point when definitely by the time I came on the scene, of Isaac Asimov, of of uh, of Bradbury, of Ben Bova, of kind of hard science fiction guys, Larry Niven, and most especially Robert A. Heinlein. And a lot of this was really smart guys who knew better and could figure out the world. And there's something in that really appealed to an insecure, um, kind of nerdish dude like myself. And science fiction is so much more than that, but this was my limited capacity, my limited vision of the time, really latching on to aspects of these guys. And not all these guys were all that as limited. Or Samuel L. Delaney was around then, who I somewhat bounced off of because I was not ready for Samuel Delaney at that point. Um, but yeah, there's just sort of an emotional core of like what I was going for science fiction then. It was very male, and it was very a lot of the characters were the guys who knew it all. They were they were like they knew everything. They did the, Robert A. Heinlein kind of info dump. You know, I'm going to lecture to you and tell you what it is. I'm going to let you in on the secret, so you too can have the secret. It's, um, you know, Steve Donahue makes fun of BroTube nowadays, but in some ways, these guys, these patriarchal father figures of the time, um, they appealed to what I would actually say is a very similar audience, some similar demographic of young guys looking for some kind of a guidance of that time. You know, this is not going into the true core ideas. This is strictly coming at it from my emotional. Why did I latch on to this? Um, at the time. So like, why did I love science fiction so much? That's probably why I did. That has shifted over time. And maybe it's a reason why I have a less of an attachment to science fiction now, is that that's not particularly a need that I feel my the emotional crutches I need nowadays are much different than the ones that I had, are hopefully different than the ones that I needed back in the day. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that and see how I want to shape that into a question and answering a question on the astounding book tag, because you can I can put that. I'll probably at the end talk about astounding, this group biography of L. Ron Hubbard, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, and Joseph and John Campbell, the editor, who really shaped these dudes, and shaped what his accepted version of science fiction was, which was not one, to say the least, that was really welcoming to anyone who wasn't a straight white male at the time. Um, and a certain kind of engineering kind of science fiction was very much what he was going for, and thank goodness that those shackles came off, um, because it really opened up what science fiction could be, and to the American public, and just expanded it so much and enriched it so much. Which isn't to say that these guys don't have their pleasures, though. It's tough. I find it's tough that I find that the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are can can seem horribly dated, more horribly dated than stuff that's like older, because stuff that's older has got a psychological thing of its oldie times, whereas at least for someone like me who was born in the late 60s, this other stuff is like, oh, this is horribly cringy, out of date stuff that feels like it shouldn't be, even though of course it should be, because I think about what the 80s were like, and how horrible and how different things are, how things change and how things stay the same, of that time. Yeah, so obviously that's good for me to have this discussion right now, because this is all very free ranging and jumbled, and I can hopefully try and hone it down a little bit and clear up my thought process, and maybe edit my thought process and not do too as much TMI. I don't know. We'll see. More videos later.